Welcome to part 5 of the lecture for day 7, Introduction to Loops. The last thing that I want to show you is that we can have loops that are both sentinel and counter-controlled. These aren't covered in your textbook, but the term that I use to describe them is hybrid loops. All that hybrid loops really do is they link together a couple of conditions using the logical AND. And so one way that we might look at this is we have a string called password, which in this case we have ABCDEFG, and then a guess, which we'll call in.next, or which we'll collect as in.next, then a number of guesses, which we'll call 1. And this is a sort of convention thing. And so long as we have fewer than 3 guesses, and so long as our guess and our password are not equal, we're using the dot equals method of the string, and then the negation operator. And so long as that's the case, then we increase the number of guesses, tell the user to try again, and then get another guess. And I'll show you a simpler version of this, just using integers. And then all that this does is it means that we have a counter controlled, that's guesses, and a sentinel controlled, that's our password. Okay, so here's a simpler version of this. Okay, the simpler version, instead of using the string, we've just got a secret number, which in this case will be 47, selected mostly because it's a prime number. And so we'll tell the user to guess the secret number, we'll collect their guess, and then we'll set a number of guesses equal to 1. And so while our guess and our secret number are not the same, and while the number of guesses is less than 3, we'll print out that this guess is not the secret number, increase the number of guesses by 1, and then ask the user to try again and collect that number. And we'll keep doing that until either the user has guessed 3 times or until the user has guessed the number. And then from here, if our secret number is the guess at the end, we tell the user that they guessed it, and if not, we tell the user that they didn't get it. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. And there's some design things that we can do later when we learn about methods to make this a much easier process. But for right now, this is a pretty straightforward thing. And we're just combining these sentinel and counter-controlled loops. Okay, and so here's what this looks like. All right, so we'll ask for the secret number. Remember that our secret number is 47, so we'll go 44. Then the user, so 44 is not the secret number. Try again. We'll try 48, also not the secret number, and then we'll try 46, also not the secret number. And it'll tell us that you didn't guess it. Okay, but then let's say that we guess a 47 right off. Boom, we guessed it. Or then let's say that we guess 46, and then we do 47 on the second guess, and our loop will end. So life is pretty good in those regards. This is a hybrid loop. It's not a it's a structure that you might end up using in your programming, but it's not entirely likely that you do that. More likely, what will happen is you will use the more likely way that this usually happens is to write a counter-controlled loop to go through and collect or do some calculations with every member of an array or of some other type of collection. And then from that, like if any of those array members are invalid, you might just stop the loop altogether. That might be what you do with a hybrid loop. You're not so much going to be worrying about passwords and so on. So with some loops, let's talk real briefly about best practices. Thing 1, and this is just like the if statements, where if we have a really complex condition, if we have like 5 different things that all have to be just right for our loop to either keep going or to not go, then it might be, instead of putting all of that inside our loop condition, inside those parentheses, it might be easier for us to either write a method or to use if statements or something like that, just to break that up just a little bit. And the reason that we might do that is because that makes our code easier to read and easier to modify. And the other thing that we'll have to watch for is infinite loops. And sometimes infinite loops will happen because we forget to increment our counter. Sometimes infinite loops will happen because we forgot to get new input. Sometimes infinite loops will happen because our conditions are written poorly. Sometimes infinite loops might happen because we just mistyped something. So that'll be a thing that we'll have to watch for. Then we'll also have to watch for impossible conditions, conditions that'll make it so that our loop never, ever, 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 ever is able to start. And these are things that we'll practice more with. We'll definitely practice more. Right now, I just want you to see what loops look like and how they kind of work. And so we're going to spend the next 2 weeks or so working with loops in a lot more depth, and we'll be using them pretty much from here on out in almost every single assignment, which is to say that as much as you can, get really comfortable with these. Get really comfortable with loops, get really comfortable with if statements, and get really comfortable with doing input and output. Because those are things that we're going to do with every single assignment from here until the end of the semester, or almost every single assignment from here to the end of the semester. Okay, if you haven't already, please make sure that you've done the reading, and then I will see you, cats, in our next class, during which we'll talk in a lot more depth about loops and have a chance to practice.